We're just it's gonna be a little awkward for just a couple minutes as we wait for people to trickle in, but they're entering. All right, let's get started. Hi, good evening. Welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Shani from Greenlight, and I'm thrilled to be hosting tonight's event with Valerie Hsiung presenting her new book, Outside Voices, Please. She'll be talking with Ginger Ko, so you're in for an excellent time. Before we start, I just want to say a huge thanks to Valerie, Ginger, and the team at Cleveland State University Poetry Center for making this happen, and to all of you for showing up. We're grateful for your support and for the chance to make space for conversation and connection. Just a couple of housekeeping things. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here though, and there are a couple of different ways you can interact with the authors and each other throughout tonight's event. The first is the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like one speech balloon, where you're welcome to post your thoughts and comments. And if you have a specific question you'd like to have answered, please post that in the Q&A module. That's the icon that looks like two speech balloons, and we'll only be pulling questions from there, so make sure to put them there. Tonight's featured book, Outside Voices, Please, is available for sale from Greenlight Bookstore. You can shop in person from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. At both our Fulton Street and Flatbush Ave stores, or you can order online at greenlightbookstore.com for a quick pickup or shipping anywhere in the US. And I'll be dropping the link in the chat a couple times tonight. As a thanks for attending tonight's event, we're offering 10% off the featured book. Enter the coupon code GreenlightEvents10 into the coupon discount section at checkout for 10% off. So our interviewer tonight is Ginger Ko. Ginger is an assistant professor at Sam Houston State University's MFA program in creative writing, editing, and publishing. She's the author of Mother Lover, Bloof Books, and Inherit from Cybrow, as well as several chapbooks. Her latest project is Power On, a book as an interactive app produced by the Operating System. Her poetry and essays can be found in The Atlantic, American Poetry Review, The Offing, Vita Review, and elsewhere. Ginger will be speaking with our featured author, Valerie Hsiung. Valerie is the author of the poetry and hybrid writing collections To Love an Artist, selected by Renee Gladman for the 2021 Essay Press Book Prize, Hummingbird a Party Girl, Name Date of Birth Emergency Contact, You and Me Forever, and EFG. Her writing appears in The Nation, The Believer, Black Sun Lit, Chicago Review, Denver Quarterly, and beyond. Born in the year of the Earth Snake and raised by Chinese Taiwanese immigrants in Cincinnati, Ohio, she now lives between nowhere and somewhere. Poet Lauren Russell describes Outside Voices, Please as a shifting assemblage of verse, prose, poems, scenes, performance scores, charts, and maps, in which shown speaker emerges through the clashes of language and its structure, its traumatized syntax, its colonialist dictionaries, its abusive evasions, its obfuscating corporate speak, its xenophobia, its patriarchalism, and its capacity to scorch and dazzle. Valerie's going to start us off with a reading from the book, and then she'll be talking with Ginger and with all of you. So take it away, Valerie.
I felt this overwhelming finality, this good for nothing finality. Sometimes she'd felt this way before, but never had she thought this could be a destiny, least of all a destiny that was hers. Stop here. When you're home again, you'll be able to run a bath. Maybe you should consider what you'll bring to make it feel warm, like home again. You'll get a box. Stop here. Green light. I realized what was missing was the background. Music, there's a lot of talking back and forth, and there's even music at the very front. It got so bad she was even in pain while lying down. Hallowed. I mean, saying something else, not the lies and not someone else's truth, but saying the truth that is mine differently. Performing arts. With a kid, what do you know? I was so proud to live in the lying down chair and to be somewhere no one else wanted to be. This thing had been weighing down on her, the point of no enter. Once you cross this line, once you cross it, a way to tell everyone, this is the line, this is the point of no enter. Who could say no? Who could say yes? That's what everyone says. I know it sounds ridiculous what I'm saying now, maybe even how I'm saying it because of what I look like, and you've likely never imagined someone like me in this kind of environment. But I'm not here to talk about that now. Maybe I will have achieved my purpose anyway. For a while, I thought bringing the show to various cities could accomplish something, but quickly I realized this was equally futile. His back is turned. You say you can't wait until we're there, but she was a young and perfectly healthy girl, died in her sleep. Should I keep going? If all things go accordingly deep in the valley of let me show you then. I knew people like that, superstitious, sad, sweet, awful. One rainy morning, he made her sit there until she finished the bowl of whole milk she was allergic to. Now that's grit, grit, no Broadway in town kind of grit. The only thing that's possibly missing is me grit. Surely we have some family thing we could melt into a band. So I'm the corrupt one, where I've never belonged. Anytime I'm bored, I just need to remember how lucky I am where I'm the corrupt one. This is a different kind of spell. Hi, Daisy. It's all here. If bad luck should fall on us, it's all actually here, Daisy. Without a medium, instead, she stayed up late trying not to listen to signs from above. Without a Bible, she made a mess on the countertop of her abundance of instinct. What if New York City were her South Pacific, according to Kid? Don't laugh. Something about the religious zealotry that made him not hungry, kissing frogs and warts. I was tired still, but forgot how tired I was, kissing frogs and warts. Triangles, and a younger woman escorts an older woman from the front of the building towards the side of a vehicle. We were all tadpoles once. Don't look at me like I have tadpoles in my eyes. Someone might get the wrong idea is all. And don't get sloppy now either. I'll be done soon enough. She'll be done soon enough. It's true, the two of them looking the way they did probably had no business doing anything in that place. And she wasn't trying to start rumors or see how far she could take them away from what she knew. It just happens she'd actually done it, found someone whose fear of starting over again was greater than her fear of boredom. After all, they could entertain themselves. Take me to that sacred spot. Everyone professes to be the site of honeymoons, but calls by the wrong name. They stopped having fun, but they were always having fun. They stopped at the green light having fun. She was alone and she was sitting in the passenger seat and she wasn't driving. And then she put her foot on the pedal.
Valerie, I'm so happy that I got to hear you read from that book. This is also the first time I've been honored by being able to hear you read your work out loud. And that kind of goes into my first question for you, which, you know, when I was reading this book and then hearing you read from the book, which was both like everything and yet more than I imagined. I was really struck by the quality of voice in your work. And so to kind of ask like one of the most obvious questions, you know, what are your inside and outside voices, and how do you inhabit them?
Well, I think a lot of my writing works outside in. And by that, I mean, there's a way in which my outside voices need to go off and wander on wayward paths and get lost and meander without the map holding it down, to eventually come back inside, but with a new form or another form of attention and noticing, because I think in going off, you're able to actually, in going off and inhabiting your loneliness and solitude, you're able to come back and be closer to what it means to be with and to make world with others. So I think, you know, that's something that needs to be protected in order to behold each other, so that we're not trapping people, and so that we can give each other freedom. And I guess I'm thinking about this in relation to a projection of a kind of loneliness that sees loneliness as a bad thing, or like as a menacing thing, or something that is to be avoided, or something that can even be avoided. And I think of what this has to do with an idea of belonging, actually, because I think a lot of children of diaspora, for example, or forced expulsion, or other histories where place and language and culture has been ruptured somehow, that feeling of loneliness or homesickness is what I like to think of it as, has often been with them no matter where they are. And even at home, so-called, because like, what is home? And so in this book, you know, the concept of outside voices is absolutely nodding to the sort of disciplinarian table, that chair of discipline that we've all had to sit at, of inside voices. And I'm thinking how, you know, the orphan children, the children of diaspora that I identify with, we've had to kind of sanitize ourselves and change our voices, or actually learn the voice of the institution and be better at the institution at performing that voice than even they are. But that's a lot of work, to constantly be overperforming. And so I think eventually it kind of breaks you and forces you back to seek like an unmarked path, to seek the place where there isn't a chair and there isn't a table. And so that's what I mean, kind of like how my writing works in a way that's outside in. The voices work outside in, and in order to come back and sort of get past like all the script that we use, that the institution uses, and that we ultimately, unfortunately, do have to use to get by at all, but hopefully to do so in a way that we can kind of call out the fuckery of the institution and of these tables of power that we kind of we find ourselves playing roles in. So
I really like how you talk about like protecting connection, because like so much of what I'm struck by with like the voices in this book, and then like, you know, you like reading from the book and vocalizing the book, is like like my trying to find a language for describing the voice, which like I want to say like feels very like childlike to me, but not in like a naive or like ignorant way, but in kind of the way you were describing, where it's like, you know, like both as children and like from, you know, what I saw of like my parents' immigrant experience, it's like being childlike sometimes, or like being in the position of like a new immigrant is like saying things that you are not supposed to say, which is like, you know, like not being acculturated, right, to like the dominant culture of like knowing like what is considered like appropriate or like inappropriate, and thus like committing like these like social faux pas, right? And so you like putting that together for me was like very interesting to me. It kind of like made me think about like my parents who were immigrants and how so often they're kind of like put into like this childlike position by the dominant culture, because they're always having to like learn you know, what it is that they're doing wrong, right? And I wonder if you could speak a little bit more on that, just like the audacity that's kind of like in your book, you know, like that willingness to like be authentically like state what you feel, or state what the speaker is feeling without any kind of like excessive like stylization, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so much of what you said resonates with me. The first thing that comes to mind is my mom, and the way that oftentimes I feel that when I see specifically white people react to my mom, and I mean this in like even my least cynical interpretation, it's often like, wow, she's so funny. And the thing is, she is funny, but then I'm always taking a step back and realizing that there's like a bluntness to the way that that her English arrives, and that bluntness is this deadpan, just using a word very thickly in a way, but also sometimes it's the wrong word, the way you kind of said a child could use the wrong word. But in a way, there's more truth to it because it's being used incorrectly, but perhaps more close to what she's trying to say. And I think that that is something that probably runs through this book as well. And a lot of my writing is, it's not quite the right word, but I'm interested in sort of antagonizing correctness and how that relates to what someone else might think of as being, like you said, naive or childlike, but then really subverting that and seeing the possibility in that, and how it's much more complicated than what's being perceived, perhaps.
To kind of like go into your book, there are these sections that have like the head of the snake and the tail of the snake, which are very like visually compelling. I'll find one and kind of hold it up for those who haven't had a copy of Outside Voices. I mean, just like visually on the page, I feel like there's just kind of what is the other end of the spectrum of like what you were just talking about, which is kind of using like the tools of the masters, right, to kind of like prove something. I wanted to know if you'd like to speak to that, like what you were kind of thinking with those pieces in particular.
Yeah, I think I call them the two snake poems, because, and for people who haven't read it, there's a density in the language, and it's kind of a nod and a wink to some texts, some philosophical and critical theory texts that that have been important to me. But at the same time, the reason it's contorted and presented and made to fit in this snake shape is that I have kind of it's taken me a long time to come around to feeling any sense of ease with that language, with the language of the master. Like, I'm very suspicious of that. And I've never felt like fully at home in it, which is probably one of the reasons I've always gravitated towards poetry, because it holds space for not feeling comfortable with language at all, or questioning comfort with language. And similarly, it's taken me a long time to feel mastery or ownership of my zodiac sign, which is the snake. And which, you know, in the Judeo-Christian sense is as much sin as it is wisdom, or desire as much as it is like self-consciousness, which are themes that I'm always interested in. And I guess I'm thinking about the way that like language that is sort of, I don't want to use the word heightened, but sort of the master's language, when it is being taken over, there's kind of, I've been picturing it as like clamping down on an area, like applying pressure somewhere so that tension can be released elsewhere. Kind of like the way actually that acupressure works. Like, you're clamping down in one location so that a corresponding coordinate releases. For me, that was my first time writing in a way where I was really fully, like, I felt like I was hacking into that territory. And I think it felt important because not only has the language of philosophy been something that is important to my poem, the poem of my life. I feel like it's a way for me to like shake the walls a little bit of the space of the master, and to complicate that relationship of like, who's authorized to speak, whose word counts, who, you know, and to sort of weave through the room, rather than having someone at the podium, people looking up to the podium, receiving knowledge. It kind of complicates what we think of as knowledge acquisition and how we learn things, how we learn about our environments, what humans learn from each other, and how that process works. It's not this vertical thing. It's actually snake-like and meandering, and our bellies have to get dirty on the ground. Yeah, so.
I really love like the positioning that like you offer my imagination, or like my mental visualization, you know, which feels, I don't know, like at the same time, like kind of what you were describing, like very fraught and full of, you know, possible like landmines, but like also very exciting and offering a lot of movement, you know, in like navigating a space that wasn't made for everyone, but still like daring to enter, and also like getting positive things out of it, right? Like getting like ideas and concepts and affirmation that is like important to us. And like, I'm just really struck right now by like my mental image of just like being like lower down to the ground, and like being able to just kind of like swerve around things. And so that kind of like makes me think of like another question I had, which was like, with this book and so much of your other writing too, I'm trying to like conceptualize it without being too abstract, but I feel like I get a very cinematic feeling from your writing, but not in like a visual way, but almost as if like your words themselves are like the verbalization of language is what is like creating a scene or a landscape. Does that resonate with how you think about your writing at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially in this book, I'm thinking, I do think scenically in a way, but specifically with background noises. And I don't just mean like glitches or the sound of paper shuffling, but I really mean, you know, the people in the background who aren't at the center of things, who aren't in the center of the image, who are in the background. I'm interested in what conversations they might have been having with each other. But I think ultimately that's being filtered through me. And so that sort of motion that you mentioned, I do, sometimes I feel that when I'm revisiting these poems, that there is this kind of like ventriloquist effect of this person who is kind of in the background, in the periphery view of those who are looking. So they're kind of seen, but not really seen. And it kind of, it's like a sidebar for them to sort of like, they might be seen, but it's a way for them to sort of ventriloquize a voice of someone looking at something and trying to throw them off a little bit, as much as it is like taking back. It's something that I feel that we've already been speaking about, just taking control of the script a little bit, and letting the person who's not normally named or the anonymous voice have a side performance almost. So I do think of it as scenes and the ambiance and atmosphere of scenes in a way, especially in this book.
With this book, and you know, you do like address it in the poems inside this book, about how like the gaze and the knowledge of others, like no matter who they are, kind of like always works to transform whatever it is that they are looking at, or you know, whatever like person that they are interacting with. And so to kind of like go back to what you were just saying, as like your poetry being like filtered through you, like how do you feel, like what are your like goals, if any, with this book, as far as being read by others, and also being read as, you know, specifically like the poet Valerie Hsiung, you know, like I don't know, do you even think about that at all, or is it of importance to you?
Maybe my goal is too large or non-specific, but I think it's probably, and this might not be satisfactory at all, but I think it's probably similar for anything that I write, is that I'm hoping for a reader to suddenly feel a different sense, a different relationship with their own language, with the everyday ordinary language that they use, and how it can be super dangerous to fall into a passive relationship with it. and it can be incredibly transformative and change every facet of your life to refuse that passivity and to start messing with it, or to be aware that if we continue to be passive, it's sort of what the structures that be want of us. And they will continue to sort of exert their mind control over us, which sounds crazy, but it's the truth. And I know it and I believe it. So yeah, it might be too ambitious of a goal. I think, in terms of other things of wanting to share experience and wanting to braid histories, and that is something that I think is there no matter what, but I can't describe those as goals. Those are simply things that I can't help but write about because it's the content of my life, if you will. So I don't think it would be accurate to describe those as the goals, just the conveying of those facts, but really it's how it happens that is so much more that brings the importance of conveying it to life, if that makes sense.
For sure. And I feel like something else that your book manages to accomplish really well, and by saying that, I guess I'm implying that some books don't, but maybe they don't, but like, is like this, you point out like the power that like is inherent in like relationship with language, as well as the potential for power that like you were just describing, which is, I felt very like validated by your book in many ways. Only to like kind of like read the language and history and thoughts and like manipulations of language that it was like so heartening to me. But then like immediately I was like, there are folks out there who like believe that they have a passive relationship with language, but in fact, because that they are so empowered by, traditional like racial and gender and sexuality, for instance, like identities that are accorded more power, they're not actually as passive as they think they are, right? And so I guess this is my long-winded way of asking, like, how do you like think about like the differences amongst your readers when it comes to your book?
Wow. I imagine that there would be a variety of relations that they hold to what they view as you said, their passivity to language, or how much power they hold with it. And the truth is that I'm probably I'm more suspicious of those readers. Not that I want to reject those readers, but I welcome them. But then my response is a suspicion of their feeling that they can penetrate into the caves of the book, if you will. Because even as the author of the book, I don't feel that I'm the perfect reader of my book at all. So maybe I'll I feel that I could talk to you for quite a bit on this one, but my thought is a bit loopy on this, but yeah.
Yeah, that's understandable. Like, so if we could, I mean, I would love to just bring up, like, you know, what is very like obvious, but also very very dynamic in the book, which is your use of your polyvocality, your multilingual approach to writing in this book. I don't know if you just kind of want to talk generally at first, like your process with that, like if you like how different languages work in your writing process.
Yeah, I think a little bit of background is the languages that appear in the book, English, Mandarin, and French. They're all languages that I have some relationship with, but all of them are fraught in a certain way. I think beginning with English, from day one of my formal education, I, you know, like many children who grew up in a home where English wasn't the primary language, was misassessed on like a human level for what was probably perceived as my lack. Because it wasn't understood that growing up in a home where English wasn't the primary language, that my English would be less naturally. But I think, you know, I just absorbed that, and English did become my predominant language because I grew up in a monolingual school system, and Mandarin became a secondary language and the language we spoke at home and within our community. And I just there's a lot of whispering that happens in this book, or modulation of voice. And I'm thinking about that now because something that I realize is, at a certain point in my childhood, when I realized that, you know, when my mom would speak to me in Mandarin in public, I would cringe, and my response was always in a whisper, like, who's around right now? And I felt like I had to compensate, not only by whispering, but by changing my body language and the way I presented to the world to compensate for what I had internalized as like the roughness or vulgarity of Mandarin, because English had become so predominant in my ear and was this thing that was assumed to be neutral. I could only hear what was wrong with Mandarin. And that probably fucked me up in a million ways. But I think it became this game of whispering and performance and smoothing what I thought was this rough way of our life and what we had to hide. And all of that led me to another colonial language, you know, French. And so I think a lot of that twistedness I ended up dwelling on in the book, whether intentionally or not. And then, you know, to this day, I feel like my relationship with Mandarin, and I think it appears in the book, it's fraught with those memories of like hiding and whispering and my own shunning of it. And also just the frustration. There's this frustration of mistranslation that happens, I think, in the book too, that it was like as my home language, which eventually became English, and then my mom's home language continued to split, it could be so frustrating to feel that I didn't have the word to describe what I wanted to describe. As a result, I got really good at using like a surplus of really rudimentary words to describe something very, something that one word could have substituted. But that surplus of language, of dancing around something a million times until it was enough to describe this one thing that could have been described with one word, has kind of followed into my preoccupations in writing, and how that is kind of a way of seeing the world that opens you up, actually, by not having that resource and not having that access, and having to reckon with, like, we're speaking past each other and it's so frustrating. And yeah, I think it gives as much as it takes. So, well, maybe not, but you have to put in a little bit more in order for it to give something back to you. But yeah, is that some close to your question? I feel that I strayed a bit.
No, not at all. I mean, my question was very general, and gosh, it makes me think, your answer makes me think of so many things. I mean, I definitely had childhood experiences that were very similar to yours, as far as, like, you know, knowing my mom as a person, like, outside of the home, you know, or outside of my, like, more intimate relationship with her, where I understood her as a person, as a complete person, rather than someone with what could be considered an incomplete, you know, grasp of the dominant language. And I think that kids who grow up with a language or even a vernacular in their home that is different than the dominant language or vernacular outside of the home really have a really good understanding of, like, code switching, and also performativity. You know, like, I know performativity has these days a negative connotation, but I mean, do you have thoughts on like, you know, putting on different masks, or performing or performance as a kind of, like, purposeful, perhaps deliberate mistranslation of, like, certain like characters or scenes?
Well, immediately what pops to mind is kind of the idea of, like, claiming a pejorative term that could be thrown on you, and almost like sliding into the skin of that, and overperforming that, because there is some mistranslation there. Your entire identity and being is being mistranslated by the pejorative. But ultimately, I feel that if we just refuse it, because there is, the book is full of that. I think that if we simply discard them and refuse to talk about it, it's actually more dangerous, because then it's kind of like thinking that there's no future for us in the language if we're closing off certain places. So I think it's so important to not only not discard certain words that are, and masks, as you say, that are cast upon us, but to enter into them and to play the role to its extreme, to see how our doing that can kind of change how it exists in the future. And we have to sort of mutilate it in a way to get the job done.
I mean, I keep going back to, like, you know, childhood and the childlike state and how powerful it can be. Like, what you just said makes me think about how, like, children can be so powerful because they're just like not afraid to be freaks, you know? Like, and I feel like we lose that. We lose that as we get older and indoctrinated. And oh yeah, that's a great quote in the chat. I am cringe, but I am free. And so kind of like recovering that willingness to really like play out the roles and characteristics that are imposed on us feels so like audacious to me, in the same way that like your language is audacious in your book, you know, where it's just like almost like a challenge, right? It's like, oh, fine, yeah, let's go there, like let's do this, like, right, like so yeah, I just love that energy. It's so inspiring and very pleasurable for me to inhabit. Another thing you mentioned is like the future of language, which I just like, you know, I think about it all the time, as far as like, obviously I don't have like cohesive thoughts on it, but I mean, when I think about how the more we know about things and the more we understand about anything, the more complicated it seems, and almost like impossible, or at least requiring a lot of bravery to continue moving forward instead of you know, taking the easy way out and reverting backwards. So I was wondering if you had a personal approach to that, or if or perhaps it's a different experience for you and you don't feel that like pull sometimes of just being like exhausted and wanting to like just give up.
I absolutely feel the exhaustion, but I think my engine kind of works in a way where I am only able to continue forward by focusing on my present surroundings in a way, which maybe is sort of reducing it to a contemplative notion. And there certainly is that aspect to it, but I think it includes me being able to focus on my present. I'm constantly like in this struggle with history and like facing memories that are painful and facing things that were said that I'll never forget. And so, you know, for me, I go to poetry and writing, not necessarily for its record keeping abilities, or it's more of like a way to reiterate what we remember in a different way. It's like this act of constantly elaborating or something. Like the second we stop letting ourselves spill over, the second we stop recognizing how exhausted we are because we are spilling over, then the thing that I have, which makes me feel alive and free, which is my language, like dies or something, and then there is no future for it or something. And so I guess, you know, for me in writing and the poems that I'm continually returning to, I feel like a huge connection to mine or to your past, but I'm seeing what I take away from it is the way that your language or my language is able to work through those histories and those memories and form them into fantasies in a way. And so I think that a lot of that is exhausting though. As you said, that in itself takes energy, but maybe there's just a little bit more that it gives you, because there's enough times when you're just falling downhill that you're able to sort of recharge a little bit, in allowing yourself to go to that space or something.
I'm gonna carry that with me. Just that image of just like accelerating downhill as a way to like recharge my batteries. I really like that. So let's see. I'm looking through my questions, and oh, okay. So something else I would love to ask you is, so this is kind of like pulling together, like, you know, things that I already mentioned, like the sonic cinematic quality of your poetry, and also the like the movement of your poetry. When I sent you like some things I was thinking about with your book, I mentioned like zooming in and out, like just kind of like staying in motion, not like a shark does to stay alive, but staying in motion because, you know, there's like a drive behind it, like an interest in the world, an interest in, you know, oneself. And so, do you position your poems in a certain location in the world, or like in the universe, or in your dreams?
As you were just describing that motion, I started thinking of like an off-duty ambulance. And I think that's kind of a lot of the worldness of my work. I've been describing it in my mind recently as like this crisis of tedium. And I think for so many people that I know, there are very, very basic questions, especially now on survival, on how to get through, like at a very, very material level. I don't even mean existentially, just how am I going to do this and that tonight? And so for me, that motion is packed with anxiety and waiting for a catastrophe that is sure to come and is also already out there, but the ones that are out there aren't located within my vicinity. So I'm just going to continue driving around the block and waiting for the one that's close to me to call me. And there's a lot of anxiety and looking inward, I think, that happens when you're expecting that, you know, things to fall apart around you, or you're driving around a world where things have already completely disintegrated. So I think that if there is a worldness, it kind of circling back to something we mentioned in the beginning, it's kind of in the edges and in the outskirts of, and definitely not in the center of things. And so even though there might not seem to be a lot of action going on, there is desolation, and there is violence, and there is so much anxiety. And yeah, the edges keep coming back to me, and the background of what's going on would be the primary location of this book and a lot of just my mind space.
I think that something that will, or, you know, the anxiety and, you know, like just the coming apocalypse is something that, like, you make very apparent in your poetry, but like it is not, your poems are not like desolate, you know, like they are very generous poems. And I think it's because of like that voicedness that you like channel your or that are channeled through your poems. And like one of the things that I was constantly tempted to detect in your poetry was like how funny you are. And like, and I don't even mean that as, I mean, I kind of like feel that in the way that you were describing like how your mom is funny, you know, where it's like, you are funny. It's not because of like, you know, the ridiculous things you do. It's like this very like very conscious like knowledge of the world that that comes through in like your recognition of like the absurd and also the quotidian, you know. So I don't know if that's something you like, or like that's just you as a poet, or that's something that you like consciously work with, like kind of like giving, you know, your reader a little like wink and a nod.
I don't honestly know how conscious it is, or if I'm just so influenced by funny people in my life. But I will say that as you were saying that, I don't find, there's something about my mom that she's not a goofy funny. It's almost like a scary funny, you know, like it's this killer funny. And that edge, that it's funny because there's so many implications of what she's saying. And she's not going to explain it for you in a way, but it's for those watching it or witnessing it, it's almost it's one of those things that's impossible to look away because it elicits something so bodily in you. And so maybe I'm interested in what's funny because it kind of reminds us that language lives in the body and makes funny noises and sounds and comes out at the wrong time and all of that, you know, and it can be pretty lethal in a lot of ways.
I love that. And, you know, I wrote this to you in, you know, my notes before today, but, you know, I do like, I feel very seen by your poems, especially, you know, the things that you address in this book. And I also just like really feel like giddy sometimes when I read it. And I love that your book like can open up so many different spaces in me like that. It's really just powerful and very impressive. I think we're at our end for our time. Is that right?
Thank you, Ginger.
Oh, thank you.
It's so great getting to hear your questions and think through this book with your questions with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you both so much for such a beautiful conversation and a reading. That was so lovely. Please make sure to pick up a copy of Outside Voices, please, either online or in store. The link is in the chat. And have a great night, everybody. Thank you so much, Ginger and Valerie. All right.